I'm going to show you how to tension your belts on your Evolve Electric Skateboard. Now the process is pretty straightforward, but it is a very important one. We recommend doing this as part of your regular maintenance schedule, or if you start to see any issues that could indicate that your belt tension isn't as it should be. So the process is the same across all our boards. Slight minor changes in the drive gears between the Hadean series and the older GTR series, but the actual process of tensioning the belts is exactly the same. Now, reasons you might need to do this: if you're experiencing not ideal range from your board, obviously tire pressures is a big one, but belt tension can also come into play with that. If they're too tight, it's going to put more load through all the system. It's going to load up all your electronics. You're going to get worse range, and you can potentially damage components of the board. Now, if they're too loose, you might find that under braking, under hard braking, you hear a loud clicking noise. That means the belt's slipping on the drive gear, and that's not what we want. So we're going to jump into it. Tools that we're going to need for this: a 1/8 Allen key and your Y tool as supplied with your board. So we'll pop the board up on its side so we can gain access to everything we need. First thing we're going to do, we're going to remove the wheel off the board. Next, we're going to remove the belt cover. Taking our Allen key, we've got 2 screws securing that onto the motor plate. Okay, so now we've got our belt cover removed. We're going to remove the drive gear and the belt so we can access all the screws for the motor to loosen that one off. So just giving it a twist, that one pops off. So as you can see here, we've got 4 screws which secure the motor to the motor plate. They're on slots. Those slots are what allow us to change our belt tension. So we're going to start by loosening off those 4 screws. We want to leave the screws still in there. We don't want to pull them all the way out because we just want it loose so the motor can slip back and forth. Now those ones are quite tight. Be really careful when you're doing this. If you find that you're feeling the tool start to slip, you can potentially damage the insert of the fastener. You may need to apply a little bit of heat. So you can use a heat gun for a short period of time on the screw. That'll soften any Loctite that was used during assembly. If you don't have a heat gun, a hairdryer, that could also do the trick. So I've got those screws loosened off. Not quite enough though. Okay, now I've got those screws loosened off, we can shift the motor back and forth. So I'm going to start with the motor around center point. Now we're going to take our belt and our drive gear. Going to slip the belt over, positioning it around the motor cog. Pop the drive gear back on, seating the belt on the drive gear on one side and giving it a spin. So it's all quite loose now, obviously. Now we want to set our tension. So to do so, we want to push the motor back whilst giving the belt a feel. Now ideally what we want to see here is about 5mm play of the belt, indicating that it's loose enough and not putting too much friction on the system there. Then I'm just going to tighten up the 2 screws that are accessible either side of the motor and then just give that a feel. Now it's a good idea at this point to pop the wheel back on because that'll pull the drive gear straight and give us a more true indication of how tight the belt is. So again, checking the tension. Now for me, that's still a bit too loose. So I'm going to go back through, loosen off those screws again, pull the motor a little bit tighter, nip them up again. So that's feeling a whole lot better. Again, I'm just going to check with the wheel on to make sure it's how we want it to be. Okay, so we've got about 5mm play there. Now we can go back through, tighten up the remaining screws. So again, to access those, we need to remove the drive gear and the belt. So we'll start with our inside screw. Now we do want these screws to be relatively tight, otherwise they may vibrate loose in use, and then we'll lose our belt tension. Okay, so motor's fixed into that position that we'd set. We're just going to reinstall everything back onto the board there. So take our belt and drive gear again. So belt on first, drive gear over, positioning the belt on one side of the gear, and then just spinning it. Now we'll pop our belt cover back on. I've still got the screws sitting in there. Now one thing I often see people get caught out is with the inner wheel bearing. Now it quite often gets left on the axle there when they pull the wheel off. Then as they're pulling the drive gear off, it can go who knows where. So just make sure before you put it all back together, you've got a bearing in each side of the wheel. Pop your wheel back on and reinstall your wheel nut. So with the wheel nut, I like to tighten until it bites and then about an 1/8 turn to loosen, making sure that we've still got thread showing through the lock nut and making sure that the wheel spins freely. Now at this point, you will know if the belt tension's too tight. If you spin the wheel and it stops immediately, it's too tight. Too loose and you'll be able to feel it. This one's feeling really good, so I'm happy with that. That's how you do the belt tension on your Evolve Electric Skateboard.